guys, it's Bree. I thought we'd do something a little bit different today and have a kind of comics and graphic novels primer. I realized that something that's been going around YouTube lately has been the graphic novel, but there's not really a lot of knowledge or experience with them. And I'm so excited if you are new to graphic novels. If not, let's just talk about them. So the comic book is generally considered to be an American art form, or American in origin. In 1933, we see the advent of the single issue comic book, which is what most people think of when they think of comics. They're about 30 pages. They include ad in text, and they are released weekly or bi-weekly based depending on the publisher. They have a general overarching storyline that's often sidetracked with side plots. Originally, the comic books that were coming out were featuring a variety of different storylines, including romance plots, film noir kind of stories, and what we might consider contemporary plot lines. 5 years after the release of the first single issue comics, we see the creation of the strongman superhero. The strongman superhero archetype is wildly popular. This we can largely attribute to a sense of chaos in the society and the World War I and World War II's influence on the desire to do good and kind of be heroic. In the 1960s and 70s, we see revival of the superhero comics. Stan Lee and his contemporaries were writing at that time and really were revolutionizing the plot lines, bringing new life to the industry. That's where the single issue comic continues to thrive. But the single issue comic isn't the only type of comic. You also have trade paperbacks and graphic novels. It's sometimes hard to know the difference. A trade paperback is a bind-up of 4 to 6 single-issue comics. A single-issue comic is only ever really going to be printed once or twice. So supply is limited and you have to get to your store on time. Having a bind-up has allowed people to have more time between reading a more continuous plot line and sense of story, and it's also much cheaper. The single-issue comic, the 30 pages that are in one of these bad boys, often run about $3. A trade paperback, which is about 6 of them, will run somewhere around 10 to 15. The trade paperback offers the same storylines as in the single issue, and recently we've seen a lot of single issue comics being developed with trade paperbacks in mind. This is an interesting phenomenon and has led to a lot more consistent and kind of continuous plot lines that have developed. It's a much less episodic approach to storytelling in comic form. Then you have the graphic novel. Originally, graphic novels were referencing translated comic works from Europe. Over time, they've become kind of their own art form. They are generally standalone or self-contained stories. They're longer by far than the single issue, and they're released in book format. For instance, this work, Brian Lee O'Malley's Lost at Sea, is a standalone comic. It's 120 or so pages, and it has a beginning, middle, and end to the story, and it wraps up all in one. It focuses on one event and has a more contemporary feel than a lot of the more trade paperback or single issue comic plot lines will. That's not to say, of course, that there aren't a variety of different ways that graphic novels and comics have been used. For instance, Marjane Satrapi has been known for her memoir, Persepolis and Persepolis II, the story of her family during the Iranian Revolution. Now, it's unusual to do nonfiction in comic form, but but this is something that's on the rise. Max Brooks has recently released a comic called The Harlem Hellfighters that's a visual documentation of the Harlem Hellfighters Brigade, which is, I believe, World War II. Then, of course, there's manga. Traditionally done in the Japanese style of art, this has gotten a lot of play in the US and the UK in the last 10 to 15 years. It's traditionally a much more combative plot lines with a lot of different character archetypes that you won't see in something like a traditional comic plot. You can tell generally that it's a manga because the binding will be on the right side of the book as opposed to the left side. And you read it from what would feel like the back of the book. It would probably surprise you to know that there are many comics that have been turned into movies, and you might not know that they were comics first. For instance, I would suggest a couple of different publishers to look at to begin with. Widely popular right now is Image Comics. They're known for the Saga series, as well as a variety of others, including Lazarus, Rocket Girl, and Pretty Deadly. These have all been popular, not necessarily on YouTube, but on a variety of platforms. You have First Second. They have done The Return of Zeta the Space Girl, as well as Jean Luan Yang's Boxers and Saints and American Born Chinese. They have a policy of avoiding gratuitous violence and sex, so they are a little bit more kid-friendly. There's Oni, who does all of Brian Lee O'Malley's stuff. His is more contemporary with kind of fun, magical, realist twists. If you are reading comics for the first time, let me know what you're interested about. What do you feel like you don't know? Stuff like that. If you love comics like a lot of us do, what are you reading right now? It's hard to keep track. There's so much going on in the comics world. So I will talk to you guys later in the week. I'm going to be doing a Bout of Books 11 TBR and update. I will see you all later. Bye.